Dead Cells is an incredible game for many reasons, but one thing about it that always stood out to me was its cinematic trailers. Most every large update for the game was accompanied by an animated trailer made by the French studio Bobby Pills. And while gameplay trailers are usually not a point of notability for a game, in Dead Cells' case they were actually something I enjoyed just about as much as the game itself. I don't really play much Dead Cells, nor have I intentionally followed its update schedule. It's a great game and everything, I just haven't had the time to put into it lately. But while it was still getting new content, I would every once in a while get one of the trailers on my YouTube homepage, and 9 times out of 9 I would watch it. Not because I was necessarily interested in the new DLC it was promoting, more so just to watch the trailer. And even now, years later, when no more new content is being made for the game, F's in the chat, I will still watch the odd recommended trailer if it popped up on my radar. It's just something about them. The trailer's visuals are distinctly unique and full of expression. They lack dialogue and yet can fully convey a fun humor and charm. The action and fight choreography are on par with modern shows and movies. They aren't the absolute pinnacle of cinema by any means, but considering they are just gameplay trailers, the Dead Cells trailers are really good. So, you can imagine my surprise when Motion Twin, Dead Cells developers, announced that Dead Cells would be getting its own dedicated animated series, co-produced by Bobby Pills and the French streaming service ADN. We got this cool, mysterious 30-second teaser trailer and the promise of 10 total 7-minute episodes. I tell ya, I marked that so fast on my calendar, promptly made a speculation video, and excitedly awaited what Bobby Pills and ADN were capable of without the restraints of a gameplay trailer format. And when it finally did arrive, it was not what I was expecting. What the fuck? The final trailer of the show was released a month before the first episode, and it was very apparent off-rip that this show was not quite what I thought it was going to be. Gone was the traditional art style and more mysterious tone of the initial teaser trailer, and in its place was this. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I can be a bit of a pessimist, and at first glance, I was not feeling too good. We didn't get a lot of info from the initial teaser trailer, but considering its art style and tone matched that of the Dead Cells game trailers, and the studio behind said trailers was co-producing the series, I kinda just subconsciously expected that the new show would follow suit in art and tone. However, that was not the case. Instead, we got what appeared to be a more simplistic art style, accompanied by a lighter tone plot. More humor-driven, disconnected from the actual lore of Dead Cells, and the beheaded talks aloud. So the question that floated in my fro was, what was this show going to be? On the one hand, my pessimistic side felt like this could be a quick and cheap ride on the massive success of Dead Cells, using the notoriety of the show's source material to offset any criticisms of the quality of the show itself, and carry its merit more so on the fact that it's Dead Cells animated instead of it's a good independent show. But it would be too brass, my optimistic self stated, to make such an assumption from a trailer. This is a fully dedicated animated series, completely free to watch with ads, and releasing 10 weekly episodes. Not exactly easy to do with the complexity of Bobby Pills' gameplay trailers, and certainly not a fully financially driven endeavor, surely. And even more importantly, I had yet to really see any of the core aspects of the show aside from its art, including its writing, pacing, world building, etc. And if these pieces of the show were high quality, it could be totally possible that they could match the quality of the Dead Cells gameplay trailers, even with the altered style, just in a way that's feasible with full-length animation. And yeah, a big part of me wished it was more on the nose with my speculation that this would tie into the existing lore of Dead Cells and have animation akin to the gameplay trailers. But maybe the disconnection from the lore of Dead Cells would be a better move from a writing standpoint. Being able to use the already established world of Dead Cells to avoid having to spend too long on setting up the world is pretty advantageous if 10 episodes was a hard cap. And not being restricted by pre-existing story structures and styles that may limit the creative vision of Bobby Pills and ADN with this very new approach to Dead Cells taken in the show, may enable them to put their own distinctive spin on what they think Dead Cells is. In the end, all I could do, again, was wait, and watch I did. Now with the full 10 episodes having been wrapped up, I can confidently say that Dead Cells Immortalis was interesting. As I stated before, the show was evidently not going to be what I expected. Part of me was a bit annoyed by this, as the teaser trailer that was put out had a very different vibe and art style in comparison to the final product, but I'll touch on that later. So if it's not the darker tone continuation/expansion of the Dead Cells lore and the style of the game's trailers, what is Dead Cells Immortalis? Well, it's a disconnected story from the lore of Dead Cells set in the world of Dead Cells, following Lori Esposito and the Beheaded, as they quest to kill the king of their malaise-infested home island and fulfill the prophecy of the Guardians of Truth that spoke of a chosen warrior who would kill the evil king and end the malaise, all while our duo navigate the heavily clashing dynamic of their opposing personalities and end goals. The first couple episodes set the stage for the story, build the world, and show how Lori and the Beheaded meet and team up. And the rest follow the duo as they destroy the fingers of the king, yes, not the hand, the 5 fingers, in order to get access to the king and take him down. As Laurie and the Beheaded quest, they learn to work together as a team and cement their friendship beyond the strictly transactional region they teamed up in the first place. Being that Laurie promised she could kill the immortal Beheaded, who has lived so long he did a Deadpool, in exchange that he fulfill the prophecy of the Guardians of Truth, of which Laurie is an underappreciated member of. These two plots, killing the king and Laurie and the Beheaded working through their clashing personalities and goals, make up the bulk of the story, and it's interesting because all the story and plot is set in the world of Dead Cells. There is the malaise that is the same malaise as in Dead Cells, there is the same king-ish, there is the same Beheaded, the same island, and mostly the same end goal, but the story itself is still so far removed from that of Dead Cells. There's the new main protagonist, the Guardians of Truth, the Fingers of the King, the relationship between the Beheaded and Laurie, a lack of many locales, people, and lore from Dead Cells, etc. Immortalis is very much its own story, just set in line with the events of Dead Cells, and honestly, while I didn't expect this initially, I think Bobby Pills and ADN actually maybe did kinda cook with this. The tone and atmosphere of this show reflect a very lighthearted feel, with simplistic and colorful imagery, constant jokes and nods made by the characters, some cartoonish ways the Fingers are killed, just overall a more easily digestible story than that of Dead Cells. And while initially this approach disappointed me, as I would have expected a similar tone and direction as that of the gameplay trailers, initial teaser trailer, and the game the series is based on itself, this show did manage to warm up on me as I watched. I like how the Beheaded and Laurie play off of each other. It's a tried and true opposite character trope, but the writing of the show makes it fun to watch, and the absence of real danger present in early episodes makes for some fun situations the duo run into. And honestly, I got less and less distracted by the art as time went on. While it was a step back from the traditional style of the gameplay trailers, this is like 80 minutes of content being released in 9 weeks with no financial assistance from people watching aside from ads. So considering their restrictions, I've got to admit that Bobby Pills and ADN managed to put a lot of life into the show, even with its more simplistic style. I would rather this intentional goofy simpleness as opposed to a very obviously under-budgeted and rushed attempt at something more akin to what I thought we were getting, both for the sake of the viewing experience and for the health and sanity of its creators. In addition, I gotta give the show credit, it does start to develop some actually serious plot in the second half of the season, with real stakes, emotional scenes, and a pretty decent twist that sets up potential future seasons very well. I was impressed that Bobby Pills and ADN could so cohesively plant the seeds of a deeper plot and grow them steadily throughout the show, still generally retaining the lighthearted tone, but also adding some stakes and depth to it to make it more than just a silly little episodic series of skits. I was actually invested in Laurie and the Beheaded, and while the OG Bobby would have had my interest regardless considering he's a pre-existing character, I think they built a pretty good character with Laurie. She has personality, sensible motives, dynamics to her character, and sure, she did fit the mold of the energetic rule follower holding herself to the utmost standard to overachieve, but she was a likable, root-for-able character, and worked well clashing with the Beheaded, making the show that much more interesting to follow. I also like that they matched the Beheaded's personality here with a believable representation of the in-game Beheaded. Exaggerated in his egotisticalness and arrogance, sure, but believably so, considering the Beheaded betrayed in-game and in the trailers did have a bit of self-centeredness and overconfidence. While the story of the show is disconnected from Dead Cells, since the Beheaded is pretty much the same person in both, I think it would have felt odd if the Beheaded were not at least sort of akin to his real counterparts. So I'm glad Immortalis kept this cohesion here and made it work well enough in their own plots. Moving forward, the episode variety and their contents were pretty good, a mix of two big plot lines. Seeing how Laurie and the Beheaded work through their relationship, usually making some forward progress in being a team and then being backtracked before moving through the conflict of the episode and progressing forward again because of it, and following the duo on their journey to take out the Fingers and the King. There were some misses, like in episode 6 they mostly glossed over the main finger of the episode, Indexa, as our episode was composed of 80% flashbacks with some slight alterations, all conglomerating to the obvious "it was a dream" thematic that Laurie figures out and stops. Indexa literally gets like 30 seconds of screen time and one line and then she dies of failure? And there was a bit of unneeded padding here and there, which would stall things up. Usually with entirely self-contained events that didn't really progress the overall plot, though this was mostly a fault in the early mid-episodes and filtered out towards the end. The side characters of the series were also kinda meh, with most being contained to their respective episode and never being used again except for the King, some of the Fingers, and the Alchemist, which is kinda disheartening as I would have liked to see a little more world building with some more permanent cast members to add to the duo. I feel like this would have helped the issues some episodes had of their lack of relevance to one of the two overall plots, since there could be more permanence and meaning instilled into episodes if more characters of importance had larger roles that carried across episodes. Still, I'd say overall that there was a better than not chance that an episode would keep me hooked for the duration of its length and held in anticipation of the next one. The duo was fun enough to watch that I could do that over and over and over, and the plots of the episodes were interesting enough to keep my brain-rotted attention for 7 minutes, so kudos there. There was a good mix of creativity in each episode plot, and most of them, more so later episodes, pointed to the grander collective plots of the season, which was a nice change of expectation since I would have assumed from the final trailer that this would be a more episodic and skit-like series. There were still elements of this episodic nature, as I honestly could not tell you any of the names of the fingers except Thumbo, cause Thumbo. And most all the other side characters were pretty unmemorable and came and went without much screen time, save for the King and the Alchemist. It's a problem area for the series, but not one that detracts too much from enjoying it, just a result of the simplicity of the direction of the show in my opinion. Conglomerating my thoughts together, in all these key areas, tone, atmosphere, characters, and plots, while there are issues, I really can't say I'm too upset about Immortalis. It's not at all peak cinema, but it wasn't really trying to be. And for what it was, it did a good job at being more in-depth and entertaining than I thought it would be on first glance. It has its issues. Sometimes it can lean a bit too heavily into humor, enough that I don't really feel any sense of danger for the characters. There's some episodes that don't feel like they contribute much to either of the main plots or any development and are more episodic. The character roster could use some more memorability outside of the Beheaded and Lori, and the overall story, while unique, is a bit cut and dry in terms of its broader strokes, with one decent twist at the end, but not anything I didn't really see coming a few episodes prior to its reveal. But in spite of that, the show succeeded in getting me to watch all its episodes and enjoy myself during them, with some good humor, good plot, good writing, and a well enough art style. So, on to the big question of the whole video. Does the quality of the show excuse the bait we got about the show's direction and art style in the teaser trailer in association to the Dead Cells gameplay trailers? Yes and no. After giving time to really think on it, I am upset that the pseudo-promised direction and art of the show was thrown to the wayside entirely in exchange for a radically different approach to Dead Cells Animated than anticipated. But at the same time, am I really going to sit here and complain about a free show based on a great game that sadly will have no more content added to it, done entirely with Motion Twins approval? I feel like it's a bit petty of me to be mad about Immortalis. In the end, I've racked up quite a lot of praise for the show. And yes, I would have loved to see a series more akin to the gameplay trailers I know Bobby Pills is capable of making, having the rare chance to expand the series further now that we have a definitive end to the game's expansion content itself. But I respect that full series shows are very different from gameplay trailers, and this was ultimately Bobby Pills and ADN's own independent work. If this is the direction they wanted to take, one that they are more comfortable with tackling stylistically and something more feasible financially and time-wise, then so be it. It's not hurting anyone, and I really don't know anything about the behind-the-scenes for the project and any hiccups or roadblocks they may have run into and had to work around. Dead Cells Immortalis Season 1, I guess, not totally sure if they'll be making a follow-up or not, was a solid season. And while I'm not exactly fawning over the prospect of a Season 2 and still clinging to some remorse that the teased Dead Cells show we thought we'd get may never happen, I think it was a pretty well-made series that entertained me through its 10-episode run with good characters, good writing, good humor, and some solid plots. Plus, I don't know why, but the voice acting for the Beheaded was good enough that he is just now stuck as canonically French in my headcanon. 7.13954 out of 10. But what do y'all think of Immortalis? Was it worth a watch to those who have seen it? Was a prospect of what could have been too prominent to enjoy the show for what it was? What would you rate the show to the nearest 100,000th place out of 10? Please let me know in the comments, and I will now continue to wait for Invincible Season 3 to release. See ya.